And we are live. Welcome to today's episode of Social Media Office Hours from Social Fresh. My name is Jason Keith. I am the founder and CEO of Social Fresh. And if you, let's say you just stumbled upon us on Facebook or on Twitter today, and you have never heard of Social Fresh, we are a social media conference and consulting company. We do some analysis on the industry. We are not an agency, but we've been doing conferences now since I think I started planning the first one in late 2008. This will be our 25th conference coming up next week, of course, virtually, Social Fresh 2020, December 8th through 10th. So if you want to check it out, just a quick plug at the top of the show, go to socialfresh.com/2020. We have a coupon code. We'll let you know later in the show as well to save 10% if you are interested in attending. But I do want to jump really quick into our conversation today. We are talking about organic social media. I'm naming this topic the art of organic social media because I think it is more art than science sometimes. But in general, just we're not sure like what's going to work on certain platforms and what's going to get engagement, but it's still the core element of a lot of social media managers. A lot of the job and role of a lot of social media managers, it's still like that core competency. So let's dive in, see what's working, what's not working. We've got a great panel today. I'd like to introduce you to two people that have already been on this week that we're excited to have back. We've got Anjali Bhatt, social media editor at Peterson Institute for International Economics. It sounds so like fancy, the whole Institute for Economics. I really love that. We've got Azad Yakatali, community manager at Consumer Reports, also joining us again. And then we also have Nice Cancino, digital marketing manager at the Tory Burch Foundation. Thank you everyone for jumping on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So good to be here.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, this is almost so much of the role of social media managers. It's weird to like call it like a niche topic, but I think what I'm trying to zero in on to talk about today is, we almost have like specializations happening in social media where people are focusing more on influencer marketing or focusing on paid social or focusing on a lot of these, what used to be just a piece of the role and are now becoming specialties. But the core piece that we still every day, every week have to get good at and it changes on each platform constantly is what actually works in the organic feed, what actually gets engagement and how do you consistently increase that and adapt to the system. So I'd like to kick off today talking about the big elephant in the room with this conversation, which is Facebook. We saw organic reach on Facebook just decline to nothing over the years, over the decade before. And the question to you all, is it worth investing and trying to put a decent portion of your strategy, your time, your resources into making Facebook organic work? Some businesses are still able to do it, a lot are not, and they kind of give up. I think a lot of brands would rather focus on Instagram as their primary channel. We were just talking about maybe LinkedIn as an option for folks, Twitter, of course. What do you think? I'll start with Anjali. What do you think is the recommendation you would give, or maybe just your personal viewpoint for your work?
Yeah, so I think that for my work, so the Peterson Institute, we're a think tank, so we're a nonprofit research organization. So I don't actually create a ton. Well, I create content, but it's from stuff that's given to me. And Facebook is not exactly, where people are going to get research. There's a big community of economists on Twitter. Econ Twitter is a whole thing. These are professionals. They're on LinkedIn, but Facebook is more, people who are more generally sort of interested in economics. Those are the people who are following us. It's not necessarily, people who come to you don't come to Facebook to read a policy brief, and so keeping that in mind has really shifted my strategy away a little bit from Facebook. We have a Facebook page, we post on it, but I've definitely started investing less into Facebook because I just haven't seen as many returns. There's some engagement, and we have there are a couple people who are really highly engaged, but beyond that, it's not really a worthwhile place to
Yeah.
invest our resources, especially with all the algorithm changes. And since we do post about political things, that can get a little dicey too. And so sort of dealing with all of that, I just kind of said, okay, this is not really worth investing so much time and effort. I'm going to keep posting on Facebook, but that's not where the most important things are happening anymore for our audience.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, of course, if you're doing paid social, it's the number one place to start, right? But
Yeah.
I think the thing that you pointed out, which is really interesting, is that I mean, I think you can definitely make it work. I mean, even for you, I think it for a think tank or university, et cetera, I think there's opportunity there. But is it so much more difficult than an Instagram or a Twitter or LinkedIn that it might not be worth the resources, right?
Yeah, and it takes a lot more time too.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. And there's a lot more trolls. You're right. And in the comments, Azad or Nis, what do you guys think about this? Anything to add to this specific piece on the Facebook question?
Yeah, I think, I mean, with anything in social, there's no one size fits all answer, right? So to Angelique's point, knowing your audience is really important. I'm at Consumer Reports where our own audience skews older, skews to Facebook. So we're putting a lot of effort on Facebook and it's still working. Trying to figure it out for Twitter and Instagram for our audience and trying to go younger there, that's where we're facing a challenge. So I think it's really important to kind of know your audience and speak to them. I mean, our parents are finding these memes from 2 years ago for a reason, right? So organic reach is happening on Facebook still. But you've got to kind of, I think, utilize it right for your audience. And I think with Facebook, yeah, they've killed traditional organic reach, but if you kind of invest your time into Facebook groups, which they've been kind of pushing out for the past year, I think you'll really get a lot of bang for your buck there more results for your efforts, I'd say, because that is where you kind of build your community on Facebook now, because they are really trying to filter out the feed to just really friends. But if you kind of build your little micro community in groups, you start your own groups, you put a moderator in there and let your community kind of talk amongst themselves. You drop some links in there. It's a really great way to kind of harvest conversation.
Is that worked for Consumer Reports? Have you done that specifically? Yeah.
Yeah. So we do that Consumer Reports. So we've got a group called CR 101, and it's basically going back to the basics of like home ownership and things of that nature, and how to fix a leak, how to buy a car. And people are throwing in questions in there, and they're all helping each other out. It's really a great community there. So it works well for us for that. But we're not getting a younger audience in there. We are skewing much older on Facebook groups. So I think it really depends on organizational goals.
That's a great point.
That's really creative. That's cool.
What do you think, Nace?
Yeah, I would say echo everything Azad is saying here, with especially knowing where your audience is. I know, especially too, when we work so closely at the Tory Burch Foundation with a lot of different small business owners, women entrepreneurs, they can sometimes have more engaged communities on Facebook. So in terms of tagging those people and interacting with those pages as well, helps to really increase engagement on there. I think similarly, organic is all about the community building. And so with Facebook groups, we've also noticed something similar. Ours is a private closed group, but we see like people are in there every single day, talking to each other, going to each other for advice. It becomes this place where, you can have these conversations. And so I think it's interesting with Facebook, just knowing, where your core audience is consuming their content is at Facebook. Because I think, a lot of times I find that brands tend to have it sort of as a check off the list. I post it on Facebook, but you have to pay attention to what your goal is on there. Sometimes Facebook can be a great way to drive traffic still. We'll see it's a top channel for traffic. Yeah. So understanding how your audience consumes content and where they're consuming it is super important.
Alexa commented on Twitter the same thing. She said higher ed social media relies heavily on organic to keep students engaged and entertained. So, I mean, all the answers here are great. I think very specific to your audience, very specific, even to just your history on social as a brand. Like if you started with a good group on Facebook, you might have a better shot at it today than if somebody screwed up along the way and ran a bunch of ads and has, just a weak audience for you there. It's not going to help you. I will say, like when we talk to brands, some of our higher end clients at Social Fresh, the conversation that I start when I talk about Facebook is 2 years ago, they changed the algorithm to where pages actually get hurt if they post a bunch of content that does not get engagement. So if you have this old strategy still going, or just this default mindset of, oh, we've got a blog, we're going to post everything from the blog. Oh, we have, a bunch of articles that we're trying to drive traffic to, or whatever it is. posting those when they're getting 0 likes or 1 like or no engagement, maybe a couple clicks on the link might not be worth your while because it's going to make it harder for stuff to show up in the future. So one mindset around that is just to post less on Facebook. And when you do, to treat it as like a mini campaign. So maybe you integrate the posting on Facebook with your email strategy, and your newsletter links to a Facebook post to try to drive discussion over there, things like that. It doesn't have to be this huge campaign that you're driving paid traffic to or something like that, but trying to backfill kind of the support and the attention to a post so that you're getting more long-term consistent engagement on fewer pieces of content might be a good strategy for people that are looking to, reinvigorate their Facebook results. One example, MIT is speaking, Jenny from MIT is speaking next week at our conference about this specific topic, about organic engagement. They've done a really great job on Facebook and MIT. Another example I'll give people that they should check out is The Motley Fool, which is kind of an investment advisory company, tells you what stocks to buy. They do really close to Twitter content on Facebook, where it's just text status updates that are like short, witty, maybe kind of thought leadership-y. One post that I pulled up yesterday just says, buy good companies and hold them for a long time. That's it. That's what we do, which is, very close to that's the tweet meme that a lot of people use on Twitter. And I mean, that could easily be a tweet. It probably is a tweet. They probably tweeted it out as well, right? And that stuff does really well for them. I mean, it gets hundreds of likes and comments, and it's just really short and simple copywriting that works well. So I think if you, I'm on the same page as Anjali, where I think it's probably too much work for a lot of companies, and it might not be your secondary choice for a platform. It might not be your third choice for a platform to focus on. And social media managers have such few resources and time. You just have to decide where to focus, but there's still opportunity there. So if you do consider it, I think don't be too daunted by some of the conversation. And I love communities, using groups and using live stream, and whatever Facebook is telling you to use is also pretty key.
Yeah, I think Facebook Live is also where there's value. Like the groups are really valuable, but that we're live on Facebook right now, I think, right? So I think that especially because it can integrate with so many different streaming platforms, you can embed Facebook Lives elsewhere. I think that's also something that still is useful at Facebook.
And I see more and more brands doing Facebook Lives into groups, into communities, which is, kind of doubling down on what they're telling you is working.
Yeah, and I have on my whiteboard back in my office in Yonkers that I haven't been to in months, post with intention, because I think a lot of brands need to stop using social media as an RSS feed and really post with intention. If you're not going to give your content a little extra treatment for social, then don't post it on that platform.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so another question on this topic on organic social. What do you think is, I touched on this at the top of the show, which is social media professionals in general are starting to specialize. I think in general, most, 60, 70% of social media professionals are still entering into their role as the person that's managing the content, posting the content, creating the content calendar. And that is organic social. But do you also need to know how to work with influencers? Do you need to know how to work with paid social? Do you think these things need to be separate, or do you think one person can do? And this is a little bit of a loaded question. I have my opinion, but do you think one person can do all of this, or should most social managers just really drill down on organic social and getting really good at that? Anyone can jump on.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I think, there are tons of people out there doing it as a one-person show, and that's how we're burning out in this field. I think it's super important that your social media team has a strategist, has creators, has copywriters, has someone focusing on paid, someone focusing on organic. And I think your social media manager or director of social should be the one kind of moving the chess pieces around, because paid is a different beast. You've got to know targeting, you've got to know your audiences, you're spending a lot of money for, say a promoted tweet costs tens of thousands of dollars. So you're spending a lot of money there. So that should be someone's full-time job if you're executing social correctly. And
it really is different content, right? Like what works for ads is completely different than what works organic.
Yeah. And there's always that debate about organic versus paid. And there are two different topics. Organic is retention, paid is growth. So you've got completely different goals and initiatives. So your paid campaign is to attract new customers. Your organic stuff is what keeps them there.
100% agree with Asad. I think they're so intricate. Organic and paid has so many intricacies. on their own. It's hard to really be an expert in both of them. But it's so important to understand, I think, fundamentals on how both the functions of each. So exactly, I think how Azad mentioned, organic is really used for these community building. It's used for retention. Once you're acquiring all these new audiences and these new eyeballs on your content, where do they go from there? How is your brand then stepping up and providing value for them? How are they keeping them entertained? How are they educating them? That's the function of organic social. So I think you have to know, and it's important to know, of course, be connected with all your functions, influencer marketing teams, your paid teams, to know how you're all working together to support the same campaign. If paid is promoting new product launches, a new promotion, whatever it may be, organic needs to know about that. So then, somebody learns about your brand, they go into your channels to discover more what you're about. They need to find some reference point to what, paid brought them in the first place. So important, I think, to understand those fundamentals, because then you can work together more holistically and have a more efficient workflow.
For me, I hate when I go to a page, any type of social account for a brand, and the paid and the organic look like they're two different teams that live in two different countries that have never talked to each other. It's like one is super polished, one is like a little more edgy and like has a personality to it. It's just that always tells me like they're just not working together. It's not like a cohesive strategy.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Riz. I think that like you can have the same person or team doing paid and social, but first of all, pay them more. They deserve that. And I think having that consistency across paid and organic to make sure that everything does, sound like it's in the same voice and seems like it's coming from the same place and has the same, like purpose is really important, because like, and it does require, different ways, like approaching organic and approaching paid, like requires different ways of thinking about your messaging, thinking about your audience and thinking about like how you're going to be reaching and convincing them. But at the same time, you're still like on the same, you still have the same product or like idea or concept or whatever. And so they do need to still seem like they're from the same team, and that it shows that we're paying for this ad, we're paying for this tweet to be in front of you, but we're doing that for a reason. We're paying for this to be in front of you because we think you'll like it. And I think understanding what your audience will respond to comes a lot from organic, and then translating that into where you put that money is really important.
Yeah, I mean, if you're paid, most brands do not have paid and organic people. I'll just stress that. But if you do have two different people, two different teams doing that, they need to be talking like every week. Like there should be stand-ups for them every week. I completely agree with that. Okay, quick break. I do want to let people know about the conference one more time before we kick this conversation to the next question. And one of the things I want to show you is an amazing line of speakers that we have coming up next week, December 8th through 10th for Social Fresh 2020. We've got Facebook and Instagram. We've got Twitter, Alex from Jenny's Ice Cream, MIT. Patrick is the voice behind the MoonPie Twitter account, going for years now, since they first started making a splash with that very snarky account on Twitter. We've got Jade, who is now at Sunwink, previously at Delta, who was rocking her move to a new direct-to-consumer company. Really interested to hear from her on our copywriting panel for social media. Lily Pulitzer, Microsoft, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, SurveyMonkey. You see them all here. Definitely check it out. I'd love for you guys to pick up a ticket and join us next week. If you do, we have a 10% off code, one word, office hours, you can use at socialfresh.com/2020, and that will get you 10% off. So definitely check that out after the show today and hit us up if you have any questions about the conference. So what I'd like to talk about next is when this shift happened a couple years ago with Facebook's algorithm, one of the other things that happened at the same time is Twitter and Facebook both started focusing on comments. And this is under the larger category of something we talk about called platform health, where Facebook and Twitter are very aware now that they are a political beast, that there's things that happen on their platforms that impact politics, that impact society, impact individuals very directly, right? And Facebook especially has gotten hit with a lot of negative public attention when it comes to the things that are happening on their platform and how it affects the world. So platform health is trying to limit what we call bad actors. It's limiting spam, bots, racist conversations, all kinds of negative conversations that happen on every social network. And one of the reasons they started to do this is to focus on comments, meaning specifically, if you can create content that generates comments, it will show up better in the feed. This is on Facebook, this is on Instagram, this is on Twitter, and even more so, they're getting very nuanced with these algorithms where, if your comment is one emoji, that's one thing. But if your comment is 3 paragraphs and it tags 2 friends and it, gets 3 comments below it, they're replying to it, that's even, a much bigger deal. If you're creating discussions and healthy discussions, then, that's going to help your content show up in the feed even more. That happens to be somewhat difficult to do unless you are just enraging people, right? So my question to you is, are you currently producing any content that you think is really good at getting comments? Is that an active strategy of yours? It's not the only strategy, of course, but what's your kind of take on this comment focused, comment bait approach to social organic?
So that the eliciting comments from our followers is not a huge part of our strategy. We have PhD economists producing research, so I don't care what someone with 15 numbers in their Twitter handle says about our research. I really don't. But I think what is really important about creating content that may generate comments is only do it if you can handle it. Like only really make that a strategy if you want responses and if you can handle what you're asking for. I mean, there's a lot of times where you see a piece of content that got a really strongly negative response, and you can kind of tell that their social team didn't really think it through. And I think you really have to understand, if you're going to put something out there, can you handle the response to that? Can you handle all these comments? And is that what you want attached to your content? Or do you want to just kind of say, here's what I have to say, and there it is?
Yeah, and that's very specific to every brand, right? Whether you have the authority and the backup to get negative comments and the resources to handle them. I think that's a really good point. And that happens on Facebook quite a bit, of course, to your earlier point. Nise, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I would just say with comments, I think you see now classic, what I'm calling clickbait with, CTAs are so important when you want to get your audience to do anything. And so now I think it's been the sort of standard across comments or posts that generate comments is the classic drop an emoji if, tag the friend who. And so it's really just focusing on that CTA. And that way it's a little bit more different than, producing something that you're hoping, there's a strategy of producing something you hope is going to elicit really strong responses. And then there's a little bit more of that clickbaity comments, if you comment when you see this or that. But I think that is more of an approach to just get everyone, you're constantly scrolling through your feed. And so telling them specifically what you kind of walking them to that point, how do you want them to interact with your brand, with your content? And then I think that honestly sets up the stage for them doing it naturally. So it's I'm constantly supporting this brand, or I'm really excited to, if it's what's your self-care, one that we had is, drop your self-care routine and only emojis. And every single time it out of the bat, people are so excited to participate and to, have that conversation. And I think it primes your audience to know this is a place where I can go to have conversations, to interact with this brand. And I know it's a fun, safe place to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I see that on Instagram quite a bit as well. I think brands have gotten better at that on Instagram specifically. I love the 2 different strategies, of course. I call it comment bait, where it's just quick alignment content sometimes is a piece of that, and I can speak to that, but then also kind of deeper conversational directions. Alignment content, so you have alignment charts. Some people might be aware of that kind of meme or whatever, but just anything where you are asked to pick something out of, there was the quarantine house one that happened at the beginning of the pandemic where, even Starbucks was doing it, pick your quarantine house. And that's just simple. I pick numbers 1 through 6 or 1 through 4, A, B, C, D, and reply very quickly. But that content can still be really good at building community and just a interactive piece of the relationship with your audience, where they're seeing themselves in your content, they're interacting with it, they feel more of a part of a group than just following a faceless brand. Anybody else on this topic before we move on to
Yeah, just to quickly piggyback off Anissa's point, some easy tactics, running polls and quizzes, or having like an AMA on Twitter or Facebook Live. Again, just putting a face behind your brand, humanizing your brand is super important. The answer is in the question. I mean, social media is being more social. Like it's really simple. We just got to get back to being.
I love
social.
it. I love it. It's in front of us the whole time. Go ahead.
And I think especially just like everyone has opinions on things and they want to share them. Like we've clearly learned that with social media, is that if you ask a question and you want people's opinions, like even on like the quarantine house, like people will pick a number and then they'll tell you exactly why. And they want to share. And so if you ask people, for their opinions, like they're ready to go and they want you to know that they're there. And obviously like that's the kind of people that social media draws, right? Is people who want to share. So as soon as you like give any opportunity for that, it's like off you go.
Yeah. The alignment content is great for that. There was I think Cisco did one on Instagram the other day that made it into one of our decks, and it was just it was a classic alignment chart. They didn't call it that. If you don't know what alignment chart is, you would just think it's just 9 photos on a grid. But they were all ways that you can organize networking cables and wires, and some of them were just like a complete mess, and some of them were like so beautiful they were art with like color coding and stuff. And it didn't mean a lot to me. It looked kind of artistic, but anybody that follows Cisco and works in networking, like this was, I'm definitely number 5, and let me tell you why. So I completely they see themselves in it, which creates a great interactive opportunity. I love that. Another piece of this that I will mention that I don't want to get too deep into, but increasingly trying to get your followers to DM you either on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter is also helping with organic reach quite a bit. So things like asking your followers to, if they want access to this next sale you have, to DM for the code or DM for the link, right? Things like that. Create these DM conversations that both help you show up in those specific users' feeds, but also, again, are creating that community, creating that deeper relationship. So I think that's something for people to consider that might want to dive deeper in this direction.
And I think that's how you get the most out of all these stories that every platform is pushing out. You have to open your DMs because that's the way people reply. Just make sure you have the bandwidth to do it, because if people are sending you DMs and you aren't reading them and aren't replying,
it's such a responsibility to just open your DMs to people. You really have to be ready for anything.
I love that. You need a strategy, you need a plan, you need to know like where to check if someone has messaged you, if you have notifications. I think for like 3 years, I could not get notifications to turn on, so we would know when we were getting Facebook direct messages. And it just drove me crazy because people would use that, and it's like a lost sale or a lost engagement opportunity. But most of these opportunities today work pretty well. I mean, most of these platforms today have options that work pretty well. It's pretty easy to check your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, and turn notifications on, or go through a platform that can give you a really easy way to organize all that. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, I didn't get to all the topics today that I wanted to. We are kind of closing the show out. Anything you want to leave our users with today? A tip, a call to action, invitation to your next Zoom party. We'll start with you, Anjali.
Follow me on Twitter and follow my organization as well. I really love economics. It's really important. And I think everyone should care about it. And it's my job to make it understandable. So follow us at PIIE.
Nice. Get your international monetary hot takes coming at you.
I'll explain what that means.
Nice. You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Once I take my mic off mute, I just want to leave everyone with a note that, yes, of course, plugging the follow. I'm trying my best to really connect with as many people and connect as many people. I think the social media and marketing community on Twitter is so great, and there's so many resources and people you can learn and follow from. But I would say that, the biggest lesson with organic is that it's aspirational in sorts. It's community building, and people don't follow you for necessarily your resources. They're there because they want to believe in something that is a bigger part of who they are. They want to identify with that. So really just finding what that inspiration is that you provide and leaning into it and making sure you're supporting your community in that way.
I love that. We call that empathy content. I love that direction. Azad, closing us out strong.
Yeah, it's hard to follow. But again, just to Nisa's point, being empathetic, transparent, And having personality on social is the way to really succeed with organic content. So anyone out there listening, watching, make sure you start doing that on your brand accounts. Follow me at Akatali, follow Consumer Reports at Consumer Reports, and I do have a podcast if you want to give it a listen. It's called OK Intern. It's on Spotify and iTunes and anything you want to listen, anywhere you listen to your podcast.
Okay, Intern, one of the better names of new podcasts I've heard this year, and our own Nicole Alonso was on an episode earlier this past month. So definitely check out that podcast. I am going to close this out. Thanks to all our guests. If you haven't already, check out socialfresh.com/2020. Our conference is next week, December 8th through 10th. And big thank you to all of our guests this week. We've got one more show tomorrow, Friday at 1 p.m. And this is our free-for-all show, so no large topic. Any questions you want answered, let us know. We've got a great lineup. I'm excited about it. And thanks for everyone that's joined us this week. We will talk to you again very soon.